Look at that. Lily is so on top of it. Let me invite.
Hi.
Hey, Lily. How are you?
Great. How are you doing? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes, yes.
Good. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me, and happy to be in dialogue.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. I feel like for you, the redistricting work has been going on for a while because you're a commissioner. But for a lot of folks, it feels like it just like popped up on folks. And now we're asking people to get involved. And so it's really good to have you on to talk about all of that. But before I get into that whole thing, wanted to welcome you to Monday Meals. And we call it Monday Meals because, sorry, I'm just looking up something real quick. We call it Monday Meals because I used to do this kind of side hustle back a couple years back, where I would make meals and I would sell them. And I called it Monday Meals. I cooked all day on Sundays, and then I would, go deliver it, or I would wait in front of my kids' school and people would come and pick it up. And it became like a thing. And at first I just thought it was like a side hustle for me, right? But then people would come and then I would spend time with them and I get to check in with people that I didn't get to check in with. And then I got to like learn. I did this for almost a year. So I would get to know like what people like to eat, because then I would put out the menu, and then sometimes they wouldn't order, and sometimes like there was always people that ordered every week, and then there was people who would order only particular types of food. So it was really fun. And then when I got it from them, or they would come and pick it up, or I would drop it off, I get to talk with them and see how they're doing, right?
Oh.
And so when I came into this job, we started talking about like what are some things that we could do. And I'm just thinking about Monday Meals being like a place where we can nourish ourselves. So while we're having lunch, so I'm going to ask you what you're having for lunch. And then, and then ask also like, what are the ways that you nourish yourself, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and all of those ways. And we ask people that are joining us today. Thank you all for joining. Like, come and put it in the chat too.
Welcome.
But let's start by introducing ourselves.
Well, I'm so glad you shared that story, because I want to know what was some of your favorite meals of cooking. I need some recipes.
My favorites are two of types of food that I really like making. I love making noodle soups. And I like making like anything kind of stir fry noodles. And then quick like stir fry that you just throw on rice. And then you could like fry an egg and like mix it up. So, but definitely, we're doing a fundraiser for Oakland Rising for the fall. And if folks donate at a certain level, you actually get to do a kimchi making class with me.
Ooh, all right. I'm gonna put that on my radar. Definitely need some of those cooking tips.
Yeah, and then the first 10 people that get that actually get to do it in person with me, and the other folks will do it online. So if you come, then you actually get to like take home the cabbage with you.
Like, love it. Well, sign me up, because I actually tend to fast in the morning. So I actually don't do meals in the morning till after lunch actually.
Oh, I see. So what are you planning on having for lunch?
Great question. I'm feeling like soup. Today is like a nice soup day. So I'm going to
Me
see if I
too.
can get some noodle soup, some ramen soup. Those are usually my favorites.
Oh, that sounds so good. That sounds so good. I'm having a green smoothie this morning, but I'm going to have a noodle soup too.
Yeah. Oh, nice. All right.
Nice. But let me introduce you, Lili. Lili Gangas is the Chief Technology Community Officer with Kapor Center, and also you are the co-chair or chair of the Oakland Redistricting Commission.
I'm officially the chair, so I'm going to be closing out the process. We've had this rotating opportunity to get as many of the commissioners involved in both the chair and vice chair. And so I happen to be the one closing out, which is also a huge responsibility as well, given the really tight timeline, as you mentioned.
Yeah. And then there's all these new meetings that are happening too. So you're probably having to chair a lot more meetings than the other chairs.
Definitely.
Sorry, not sorry, because we really pushed for more meetings. So what is another way, Lili, that you are nourishing yourself, like emotionally, spiritually? And then everybody who's joining too, y'all can join in the chat and
yes, please share.
Yeah.
Yes, I usually start my day with meditation. And like reading. So I have this book called The 365 Science of the Mind. Ooh. So every day I start my day with, and I'll share it here so y'all can see it.
Yeah.
I started with this, so just every day to also just pause and be like, okay, what day is it today? So many times I'm running around and I have to be like, what's the date? And so this helps me just like be able to say, okay, today is this day. And so like, I know if I'm not in a good place, I'm skipping certain days. And so I just remember to go back and just start reframing and just really start to find more power in reflection. And so that for me is how I keep myself healthy and sane and all that stuff.
I heard that. Yeah. You know what I've been doing, what I did this weekend actually as part of my nourishing myself. So a very good friend of mine, Viviana Rodriguez and Shamari Smith, run the E14 Gallery in Old Oakland. Right. And Viviana always does these amazing pop-up markets. And this weekend she did a pop-up market for Dia de los Muertos. And she invited community folks to, put up the ofrendas and the different altars down in Old Oakland on 9th. And I went early, and there wasn't a lot of folks. And if y'all don't know, on the Dia de los Muertos altars, they'll put pictures of their ancestors, and different people did kind of different takes on it. So there was like some very personal ones, and then there were ones that were more like community based, like AAPI Women Lead. They had like all these Asian and Pacific Islander feminist leaders, like movement leaders, like matriarchs. And so that was really beautiful. And they had they would do little ceremonies and things like that. But then there were other folks that just had had pictures of their ancestors, like their personal ancestors. So then I went and I talked to everybody that had an ofrenda and just heard the stories. And it was really beautiful to hear about just not only the resiliency, but the ingenuity and the creativity and the beauty and the love that they had for each other and family. So it was really beautiful to be a part of that. So I feel nourished. I feel really full from that. And as you know, it's happening, starts today all the way through tomorrow. So there's lots of Dia de los Muertos events. I know Eastside is having one. They're doing a procession. They do every year. But we're holding a town hall meeting on redistricting tomorrow night.
Yes.
And so I'm really excited, and I hope that if you all are going to join, to come, and you can register at oaklandrising.org/COI1. COI1. And that takes you to a page where then you can sign up and then know how to get on and that if you know how to log on. But we'll be on Facebook Live too. So you can just go to Oakland Rising's page on Facebook and watch us live. And the videos will be posted after. We're having ASL interpretation, closed captioning. We'll have Spanish and Chinese interpretation. I don't imagine that we'll, because of Oakland Rising's partner organizations, we might not have like a big influx of their membership, but we'll be posting that video immediately after. So it'll be in English, Spanish, and Chinese and Cantonese. So you'll have all of that to share out with your people, and so I'm really excited about it because I was working on the slide deck this weekend. But I wanted to hear.
We're excited about it.
I am actually. You know, it's been on my mind, and I think that what for me happened, Lily, was that you know we were talking about redistricting because Oakland Rising was a part of in 2013 led up to 2014 election
right.
to actually establish we pushed for the ballot measure for the redistricting commission to be established. Right. And so what people don't know is that what used to happen was that city council members set up their own districts, right? They would, as a city council, they would create the maps and they would create the district lines, and it would, of course, fall within their own interests, right? And we as community had to push up against them to get the maps that we wanted. So there was a lot of organizing that was happening then, but it's also you're fighting against one politician's or one elected's self-interests, right? Or whatever, they might be swayed by different lobbying interests. So this redistricting commission became a public commission that then brought in community members. And the redistricting commission has, tell me if I'm wrong, 15. Well, there's 13 permanent and then 2 alternatives, right?
Right.
And they're across the city. And it's a pretty good diverse group of folks that are from all over parts of the city because different districts run from the flats to the hills. And so this is the first time that city council actually doesn't have any say at all. And which is really, really puts it back in the power of the people, right? And so I wanted to hear from you, Lily. I was so curious about like what about redistricting like drew you to join the commission, apply to be on the commission, and what are some lessons learned that you've had since being on the commission?
Yeah, thank you so much, Liz, for those questions. I think for me, it's like you said, is the power of community. So I was encouraged to apply by the Latino Community Foundation. And just to share some stats for folks, redistricting happens every 10 years, right? And we just came out of a very controversial census data, which is probably still undercounted just given all the barriers, not only COVID, but just all the barriers to being able to have our people safely be counted and just a lot of challenges. But even then, we still have seen a 300+% increase in people identifying as multiracial. And in California, Latinx has already jumped to around 39.4%, almost 40% of all of California. And all of California right now is also going through redistricting, as there are other cities and other states as well. And you know, we're seeing the news, what's happening in Virginia and the Texas and certain places where when it's not in the community's power, it's totally being used for gerrymandering. And so that is very, very dangerous when it comes to not only representation for elections this coming year or the next for the midterms and even beyond for all the local ones, but this is really setting up the future for the next decade. And when you think about our communities, especially of color, and when we think about here in California, it's almost 40%. And in Oakland, it actually increased to about 28%. So it's now one of the largest racial and ethnic groups in all of Oakland. And that's something that's new. With the white population being about 27% and the Black population being about 20%. But the Asian community in itself also increased representation increase over in 25% increase from 10 years ago. So there's just a lot of different growth taking place in California, but we're also seeing the changes here in Oakland. And so for me, specifically the Latino Community Foundation, who has been doing a lot of work and outreach specifically on this issue, encouraged me to apply. And I was like, okay, let me go ahead and apply and go through the process, because I also know how important it is. I used to, before working at the Kapor Center, I used to do public and private sector consulting. Specifically, one of my clients was the census data, the Census Bureau. And so I've been in the weeds, and I know, so I'm like, all right, let me go ahead and be a resource to the community on that end. And what ended up happening was I was one of the first few that got selected through the lottery. So at the beginning, they had a lottery process, and that set of group of commissioners then helped select the final set of commissioners. And so we were very upfront at the beginning that we were like, okay, we need as many people that are across. We wanted to make sure it was centered also on equity, both ethnicity, income, education, geography. And so we wanted to make sure that we can have as best representative as the starting point, which is who applied. And you know what? And it was I ended up seeing the lack of community members that applied. Right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes this process seems pretty obscure, but that's where the Latino Community Foundation, they were like, Lili, you gotta come in and support. We need your voice there. So I went and I just went through the whole process, and now I ended up being the chair, and I'm also the only Latina in all of that, right? And when we take a look at those numbers that I shared earlier, we're still very underrepresented when we think about that.
That's right. That's right. And I think like one of the things too, I just want to like let folks know. So right now we have 7 districts in Oakland, and the redistricting process is something that not only happens in cities, but it happens at the county. So we're also tracking, we're not doing any advocacy around the redistricting at Alameda County level yet, but we're tracking it. There's stuff that's happening at the state, and there's also happening at a federal level too. But we're specifically talking about Oakland, and in Oakland we have 7 districts. And those 7 districts, what's important to know about them, y'all, is that this is, it helps us to decide who is our city council members per those districts, as well as our Oakland Unified School District board directors, right? And so the representation of those are really important. The other thing that's really important is because the districts are tied to resources and funding in the community. So we think about these districts, and we need to balance out a lot of different data. But in most part, the first part of it that we want to be really thinking about is like population, right? And who's living where. So they have to be evenly distributed across all the districts by plus or minus like 5%, right? And so within that 5%, there's a little bit of movement. But we want to have also some continuity across the city. And what is important about this is to know is that we can't create these weird districts where it's like tick, 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 like this all over this, like these weird lines through the city. They kind of have to be nice, continuous blocks in parts of the city. But why this is important to folks, I think, is what I think for Oakland Rising and for everybody in the city really needs to know. And so I wonder if you might be able to share about why you think redistricting is so important and why we need more folks to know about it and to get involved with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of the most important times for us, because as I mentioned, this is the lines are going to be in place for the next 10 years. So it has a generational impact. The challenge is that it's also this kind of obscure type of thing, like why should we do it? And it is a high ask for the community, right? To go and download that, look at the maps, be able to study it. People are like, I have things to do. I got to go feed my family. I got to go to work. Why are you making me work for free type of thing? However, thank you so much, Liz, for creating this space, because it is something that we're benefiting off the hard work of grassroots organizations like yours that fought to create this space for us to be able to undo a lot of the wrongs that have been done in the past, where you have areas that have been carved out and are continuously underinvested.
Right.
But now, because of the new census data, if you take a look at the maps without any of that past layers of redistricting or the past districts, you're going to see that really, if you compare the maps between now and 10 years ago, the mass amount of population growth, but also a reflection of the gentrification that's taking place.
That's right.
Across all of Oakland. And so some of the maps that were interesting, and I really encourage you, everybody that's here, and I'll drop it into the chat, you go to oakland.gov/redistricting to get all those maps. And actually tonight we're having another public hearing to get your input. Because if you take a look at the maps, and here, these are all just drafts, right? And so if you take a look at some of how West Oakland specifically has been if you look at it, very carved in around the areas where there's much more new highest pubs. Yeah, you can take a look at the economics. You can take a look at the population, and so it is very sobering. But at the same time, it's like, okay, we have the data. What's the action that we can take here, right? And so I do think that it's really critical for us to make sure that we're reviewing, because not every city, not every state has this unique opportunity that Oakland has. And unfortunately, because the census data was so delayed, and we know, a lot of the reasons why, we cannot afford to get this wrong. But if we don't get the community input, then it also defeats the purpose of making it community led, right? And so that's why right now all the commissioners, we made sure that we're prioritizing this work as our #1 effort. Being out there, I was yesterday at the Fruitvale Dia de los Muertos, talking to everybody. I was like, this is why it's important. And I was so happy to actually talk to some of the youth that were like really understanding the impact that this can have in their communities, because they see it. They've seen the underinvestment. They lived in it.
That's right.
And they're also trying to be able to find new council members, new school board representatives that are more representative of their needs. Right. And so and we're also young. It's a young town to some degree, right? If you take a look at some of the numbers. And so to me, it's really critical. We're very fortunate that we have this. And so it's a moment that we can't not engage in it. But it is a high ask. I'll keep it real. Like, you got to take at least 15 minutes, 20 minutes to take a look at those maps and be able to say, does this make sense or not? Is this as you were mentioning, some of the criteria of how we rebalance the maps? And so it's important in the sense, but it's also doable. And so I think we want to make sure that we are being heard. And so especially for the folks that are listening here, even if you're not in Oakland, there is some redistricting taking place, as Liz mentioned, in the Alameda County in the state. And so we just want to make sure we're doing it right. This is going to determine who we get to vote for, how we get investments, who's able to leverage it, and who's really representing us.
Yeah, and what I think is also really important about that representation is, so just like break it down like one level, right? So if me, like I live in D7, super deep east, but my kids go to school in D6.
Mm-hmm.
But my church, or where I do my meditation practice, is in D2, right? So you can see that, like, that I, as a person, really spend a lot of time in many parts of the city, right? And so, but my say, like how I have say in how those things happen, differ, right? So for example, within like Oakland Unified School District, I have to think about, like, not only my district, because I vote in District 7, right? But I have interest in how things happen in District 6.
Right.
Right? And so, but my voting power is in District 7, right? And so as we begin to think about that, and we think about, so where is my park? Where do I go shopping? Where are the bus lines? How, what are the streets that I take to come and go in the city, right? Like, those types of things we have say in as our city council member or our school district representatives. We do have a one rep at large position in the city on the city council. So we do have votes in two sort of ways. We have one that's tied to our district commissioner, council member, and then we have this rep at large council member, and obviously the mayor as well. But this is like important to folks because sometimes people have to actually cross a line. So if you are accessing most of your world or your community that's in a small centralized place, you want to let folks know that, right? You want the city to know, I want to have a say in how that park that I always frequent in my neighborhood, but it's in another district, I want to have a say in how that gets, how resources get allocated there, or, my access to that. The other thing to keep in mind too, as we're like looking at this, and we're going to talk about all this at the town hall in a lot of depth. We're about to get hella wonky on some of those maps and nerd out. But one of the things that we got to think about is, like, for example, in Oakland, a large majority of our unhoused population live in D2 and 3, right? And so what does it look like if we concentrate majority of our unhoused folks into one district? Like, what impact that would have on that district in terms of resources, in terms of like the council members' ability to respond, the ability for one council member to then pressure the city administration to do something in terms of administering those services. Like, that is something that we need to have consideration for, right? So there are many different types of communities that you can be thinking about. One that is like your own, like, how do I live my life? How do I like move through the world in this city? And then there's like other identifications, right, that we have, like immigrant, or as a renter, like how I'm impacted, where's the majority of the housing burden costs in the city, right? And then maybe I'm poor or unemployed or working class, like what income status, what that impact has. And even the impact of like who filled out the census and what data is actually being collected. And so the one thing that is really important that I want to let folks know too is you don't have to be a voter. You just have to be a resident of Oakland to have a say in this process. And so what are some of the things? I know that we put Oakland Rising with Asian Law Caucus, ACLU, and the League of Women Voters, like, sent in a letter to a couple meetings ago to be like, yo, we need more meetings. We need more ability to give input. And I will give you a heads up. We're going to put a little pressure on you all to put more into December and push back on some of the deadlines, because the ability for people to give input is so truncated and short. But right now, because of that public pressure, we were able to have some workshops and some extra meetings, right?
Right, we definitely. So last meeting, because we heard the people, right? And our role here is like this.
And I love that. That was so great. That was like, oh, look at that. They heard us. They're going to do something.
I think we doubled our meetings, public hearings, and like created additional workshops. And so what we're trying to do is be able to help people understand what this process is, right? And like I mentioned, we know it's not an easy lift. It's challenging in the sense of like understanding the what and the who. So moments like this are really critical for people to be like, oh man, this is directly impacting not just where I live, but where I eat, where my kids go to school, my overall city. And if we know, especially here being in Oakland, we go around a lot of different places. And so we want to make sure that whenever we are passing a lot of these unhoused areas and saying like, oh, this is such a big problem, this is really an opportunity to change some of this and change things up and be able to participate in being able to say, you know what, I'm going to change certain things. And it starts with representation, right? And I think being able to specifically be aware that there's a lot of voices that are not being heard.
because
That's right.
they're not being reached out to.
That's
Especially, I mean, even right now, we still have the digital divide. A lot of folks aren't even connected online.
Right.
And so for us having a lot of these virtual meeting points, we know that there's people not being able to be part of it, right? And so, but for the ones that have access, we, besides doing these public hearings where we are literally there to get the input for folks calling in or for folks, you know, doing Zoom, there's also these additional workshops that are really meant to be a one-on-one like this, where you can
Right.
join in and be like, okay, show me the map. What is happening here? Let's talk through this. Here's my input. Here's my feedback. How do I get, you know, this in front of more people? But we're also doing in-person events. So we partnered with the ESAR Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole set of other organizations that they're also reaching out. We partner with you, with Oakland Rising, to specifically put up more gas into the work that we're doing, because it is a really short time. And so we just did, you know, a few in-person events. We walked out over there with, like, for example, at the Fruit Bale, had the large maps, go walking through people saying, like, hey, where do you live? What's your community of interest? What intersections do you live at? Do you want that community to stay together, or what are other things that you're seeing? What are some of the things that you've been observing? And so we had folks jot that down and take that in as their public comment. So then that way we can provide it to the consultants that are helping us do the mapping. And so right now what we have is, number one, more meetings. So we did that. More on the ground outreach. So that's what we're doing.
That's great.
And even though the holidays are coming up, we also want to leverage as many events as possible to be there in person, to be able to collect that feedback in paper, to be able to collect that feedback through phone calls, through the Zooms, and then also there's a survey at the redistricting website that anybody at any time can go ahead and submit, right? And like you mentioned, the goal here is to making sure that we are adjusting for the population growth, but making sure that it's not discriminatory in any area. We want to make sure that it's not being used for any type of political or partisan bias. We want to make sure that it's done as fair as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But as you mentioned, there are those areas that has changed a lot, and unless you're there physically, or you're an organization doing the ground on the work, we might not know how much it's changed, right? And so this is the time to raise that to the level of awareness and making it a formal comment. And so I encourage you, everybody that's here, join us at 5 p.m. to take your formal comment. If you've never participated, participate. I never thought I would be, doing being a commissioner, let alone being a chair, right, to close out this process. But here I am. I answered the call of duty, and instead of saying, instead of criticizing the processes, I'm like, let me be part of this so I can make sure that it can be done as best as it can with my input.
And that I think that's one of the key pieces that I want to share with folks, right, is that there are many different ways that you can do this. So you can sit down with your family, you can sit down with whoever you decide is that community, call some people together, and you can draw it. Right? You can these are the streets. You could pull out some crayons and make it, right? You can also get on and do the fancy smancy stuff with the mapping tools. Right. And actually, so tomorrow Oakland Rising is doing a town hall from 6 to 7:30. Like I said, you can go to Facebook Live to watch that. You can register by going to oaklandrising.org/COI1. And then you can go to the town hall. And then the next Tuesday the 9th, at the same time, 6 to 7:30, we're going to be doing an actual mapping session. And what I'm kind of excited is that Elena Serrano from Eastside Arts Alliance, she's going to get on with me, and we're going to map together. So you all can watch us fumble with the mapping tools. But we'll get online together, and you can learn how to do that. If you don't want to wait that far, you could go to the website and try it out yourself. To the commission's website, just type in Google for Oakland Redistricting Commission, and it'll be the first thing that pops up. And just check out the page. You can see who's on the commission. You could see some of the criteria. You could see the proposed maps already. And then make sure that you're submitting your comments. You could put it in comments, you could write it, you know, there's the maps, you can draw them, you can use the mapping tools, you put your information in through the survey. So that's getting all collected. So the more we know from folks in Oakland, the more we're going to be able to like get a clearer picture of where we want to create these district lines,
right.
so that that distribution of resources and electoral power is happening across the city.
Definitely. And also for the folks that there is an opportunity where you don't have to even look at the current existing lines. So you could literally assume and just start from fresh. Right.
Exactly.
And so that is the other option. So all these feedback is important to say like, okay, but was it working before or not? So here is the opportunity to redraw it. And for the folks who love some of this data, like, let's nerd out together. Let's make data fun. I'm a total nerd at heart, so like, let's join me. This could be a lot of fun.
I think that about Lili. When I first met Lili, I was like, who's this cool ass woman? And then she was like, sat down with her, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's a total nerd.
Yes, I love data. So I started as a software and hardware engineer, so naturally I'm very curious about these areas. But I'm also, you know, can understand sometimes the barriers could be right to get it online and try these different tools. But
that's right.
For the folks here, though, it's a new skill. Like, you'll actually be learning. It's actually value add to you to also just see what, you know, the different ways that our representation is mapped. And so I do think it's, it'll be fun. So I'm excited for all the sessions that you're going to be having. I think it'll be also just a really reflect, right? Just giving what's happened over the last 18 months, 12 months, to just rethink, okay, like we have the opportunity here as a community to reframe the narrative that we want to have over the next 10 years. So
that's
what
right.
is
That's
that
right. And that's the key. It's 10 years of work. Like, this is laying it down for the next 10 years.
Right.
And I mean, we could get really into the weeds about like some of the politicking around it, but what is really important is that the more that folks are really sharing what's important to them, particularly in the flatlands, right? For Oakland Rising, that's where we work, because like, you know, historically within Oakland, that's who's been marginalized, and that's the voice that has been really marginalized. So if you live in the flatlands, like, this is your opportunity to really get your voice out there and tell us what does your community look like? Like, where do you live, and what do you utilize, and what do you want to see happen? I think is really important to us.
Definitely. And then it's also like, for some folks who may also be new to this whole process, it's really as simple as saying like, okay, I live in this intersection. Around my community, there's this type of store, this school, this is where I like to go eat. I really feel that it's a diverse community, or like we have common interests, right? So this is where the community of interest comes in, and saying like, oh, this group needs to stay together, right? And say like, and therefore that's your submission, and that's all you need to do. For other folks who are also more, especially the folks who've been in Oakland longer, I also would love to have your input to just take a look at the entire city and saying like, okay, well, we know all these things that are taking place in the flatlands that are for too long, right? We're starting to see some of the population growth has been in that area, as well as West Oakland, and also just in downtown Oakland with all these high rises. But if we only get input from certain people who are trying to protect their interests, then it lopsides the whole effort here, right? Because we do want to take in and listen to all of the community interests, but we also want to make sure and be aware and be transparent that if we only get a little bit of input, then it's going to be very lopsided toward one side, and that may be creating other types of inequities. And so we are really aware of that. And so I definitely encourage folks to go check out and join all these workshops. Like, believe me, it'll be a moment of like 10 minutes for 10 years. How's that? I just need 10 minutes of your life to help the next 10 years.
Look at that catchy phrase. But you know, so I wanted to just remind folks, we're having the town hall, we're having the mapping sessions next week. We'll continue to be doing things on Tuesday nights from 6 to 7:30 as we get all the way through to the end of this redistricting process. And so share it, talk to people, like get out there. Like, I love that you just said that, 10 minutes for 10 years. That makes a lot of sense to me. So where can folks follow the commission work, and then also where can they follow you at Kapor Center?
Yeah, definitely. So the redistricting process, if you go to oaklandca.gov and then /redistricting, you'll see the maps there. Currently, there are 4 maps that have been drafted. Tonight, we're actually going to provide the recommendations for the contractors who are doing the maps to update them. And so we want to take in as much, and then we'll get refresh maps that will be uploaded in that website. And that same website, you can submit your 10 minutes of community input through that survey. You could also join us tonight at 5 p.m. For the public hearing. And so we've added a few dates there as well. And so I encourage you to check it out and see which one you can join in. And then there's also additional ways through our partners. So like Oakland Rising, East Arts Alliance, a lot of different organizations that are also doing this work and helping us get you all engaged. And then lastly, I would say from my end, I'm playing like a double role here, right? So I'm at the Kapor Center, but then I volunteer my time in this role. And so through the Kapor Center, for folks who may not know, we're helping increase more representation and pathways for our community, specifically Black, Latinas, and Indigenous, to enter tech pathways. They're one of the most underrepresented groups. And so we want to provide that opportunity towards ownership and building our own tech. That'll be a different discussion, Liz, talking about
we should have you back so that you could talk about all of that work.
Yeah, definitely. We're getting ready to publish our platform of 9 issues, and one of them is around that. So we're definitely diving into the racial justice and tech policy issues. So we'd love to come back and share that as well. I think it's really important.
Let's do that. I did want to mention one last thing that I forgot to mention earlier, is that Oakland Rising, with the Black Census and Redistricting Hub, last year we ran a few civic engagement programs where we're going out and encouraging people to fill out the census through the hub. And then we were a part of running a couple community of interest sessions where we were mapping with Black-led and Black servicing organizations here in Oakland. And just so that you know, that influencing the redistricting process at the state level. So we have ensured that with that, like certain pockets of West Oakland and North Oakland, as well as in Deep East Oakland, that those are kept together and not cut off and then sent into another district. So potentially it could have cut part of North Oakland into a Berkeley district. So instead, we were able to really advocate for something different. And through the Black Census and Redistricting Hub at the state level, are really trying to push for more of that equitable representation at the state level. So shout out to them for all their work that they're doing, and really proud to, as Oakland Rising, to have partnered with them to do that work. And so just really thankful to you, Lili, for coming out tonight. Oh, and I see Bandung Books says, and Bandung Books is connected with Eastside Arts Alliance. They'll be at the Acoma Market this Sunday from 11. It starts usually at 10, right?
10,
and it goes all day till about 4 or 5 o'clock. So show up there, and they'll be doing redistricting work and selling books. They always have a crate of free books, y'all. So just show up.
I will see you there. And there's also some other redistricting workshops that are being done. If your organization or anybody that's listening would like to get additional support, please let us know as well. Commissioners are also opening up to be able to do that for anybody that needs it. I know that the time is short, and we are trying to do as much as possible. And just remembering, folks, that our goal is really to find a way to provide equal representation based on population, making sure that we're not separating physically some of the areas that need to be contiguous, but we also want to make sure that we are adjusting as is also needed and reflecting the current times that we're in. And so, as Liz mentioned earlier, this has huge roles on who can run for office and who can't. So hope to see
Great.
you, and
So
I'll see you on Sunday, and I'll see you on tonight.
I'll see you tonight.
This is my new life now.
And then I'll see you tomorrow if you're going to show up to our town hall.
Yes. Thank you so much for organizing. Thank you all for joining.
Bye. Thank you. Bye, Lily.
Bye.